there's a particular kind of peace that some people carry with them. One that doesn't come from escaping the world, but from finding contentment within their own walls. While others chase excitement in crowded venues and distant destinations, these individuals discover something profound in the quiet corners of their homes. They're not avoiding life. They're living it on their own terms, in a way the restless world often fails to understand. You might look at them and assume they're missing out, that they're lonely or unmotivated, that something must be wrong if they prefer their couch to a concert, their window view to a weekend trip. But this assumption misses something essential. The psychology of people who love staying home reveals a depth that the constantly moving rarely develop. These aren't people who can't handle the world. They're people who've discovered that the richest experiences don't always require leaving your front door. When researchers study people who genuinely prefer staying home, they discover something fascinating. These individuals often possess what psychologists call high internal self-presence. Their inner worlds are not empty or lonely spaces. They're vivid, active landscapes filled with ideas, emotions, and imagination that rivals anything the external world offers. Their minds are studios of creativity. While others need constant external stimulation to feel alive, homebodies generate their own meaning from within, and they can stare out a window with a warm drink and experience a depth of contentment that others chase across continents without ever finding. This isn't settling for less. It's recognizing that fulfillment comes from internal richness, not external noise. The science backs this up. Studies show that people who enjoy solitude consistently score higher in creativity, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness. Their calm isn't weakness or avoidance. It's a foundation that allows them to process life at a deeper level than constant activity permits. They feel emotions fully rather than skimming across their surface. Joy becomes richer. Sadness becomes art. Hope becomes direction. Their nervous systems function differently too. Where some people are energized by stimulation and crowds, homebodies can feel overwhelmed by the same environments. It's not social anxiety necessarily, though that can be part of it. It's sensory sensitivity and emotional depth that makes chaos exhausting rather than exciting. Their brains process more information from their environment, picking up on subtleties others miss entirely. Home isn't escape from this intensity. It's the one place where they can finally turn down the volume. Here's what's rarely discussed. Many people who love staying home didn't always feel this way. They often spent years trying to match the energy of friends who thrived on constant plans and social activity. They pushed themselves to enjoy parties, and they found draining. They questioned why they felt depleted after events that energized everyone else. They wondered if something was broken in them. The turning point comes when they stop fighting their nature and start honoring it. When they realize their preference for quiet isn't a character flaw that needs fixing. When they understand that needing less social stimulation doesn't make them antisocial or boring or afraid. It just makes them different, oriented toward internal experience rather than external validation. This realization can feel like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. The pressure to be someone else lifts. The guilt about canceled plans fades. The shame about preferring a quiet evening at home dissolves. They begin to see their preference not as limitation, but as self-knowledge. Not everyone needs the same things to feel fulfilled, and pretending otherwise only creates suffering. But this understanding doesn't come without cost. Society sends constant messages that staying home is settling, that real life happens elsewhere, that you're missing out if you're not constantly on the move. These messages can create doubt even in people who genuinely prefer solitude. They start questioning whether their contentment is real or just fear wearing a mask. They wonder if they should force themselves out more, push past their comfort zone, become someone they're not. The truth is more nuanced. Yes, growth sometimes requires discomfort. But there's a difference between healthy challenge and violating your fundamental nature. Homebodies aren't refusing growth. They're growing in ways that don't require performing for others or seeking validation through constant activity. Their growth looks like deepening self-understanding, developing creative capacities, building emotional resilience. It's just quieter growth, less visible but no less real. People who love staying home become masters of introspection. They don't just live through experiences. They process them, turn them over in their minds, extract meaning from them. Every small moment can become a story. Every memory holds lessons. They have the time and space to actually think about their lives instead of just careening through them. This creates a level of self-awareness that's increasingly rare. They understand their emotional patterns. They know what drains them and what nourishes them. They recognize their triggers and can articulate their needs. Most people live entire lives without developing this clarity, constantly reacting to circumstances without understanding why they feel what they feel or want what they want. Homebodies learn early, because when you spend time with yourself, you can't avoid self-confrontation. There's no distraction, no performance, no external drama to focus on, instead of your own internal landscape. You have to face who you actually are, what you actually think, what you actually want. This isn't always comfortable. In fact, it's often difficult. But it produces authenticity that constant activity prevents. They become excellent observers of human nature too. Because they're not always participating in social dynamics, they can see patterns others miss. They notice the micro-expressions that betray true feelings. They pick up on power dynamics and unspoken tensions. They understand the mechanics of relationships with an anthropologist's clarity because they've had time to study behavior without being caught up in it. This observational capacity makes them exceptional judges of character. They're harder to deceive because they're reading multiple levels of communication simultaneously. They spot inconsistencies between words and actions. They recognize performative behavior and can distinguish it from authenticity. They see red flags early because they're not blinded by the desire to belong or the excitement of new connection. There's a pervasive narrative that staying home means missing life, that real experiences require movement and crowds and constant novelty. But this narrative serves people who profit from your restlessness. It's not universal truth about how humans find meaning. The people who love staying home aren't missing out. They're opting out of a particular version of life that doesn't serve them. They're rejecting the idea that fulfillment requires constant consumption of experiences, that your life only matters if you can post it on social media, that happiness means never being still. They've discovered something the perpetually busy haven't, that presence is more valuable than accumulation, that depth beats breadth, that a few meaningful experiences matter more than 1,000 shallow ones, that you can travel the world and never leave your comfort zone, or never leave your house and explore universes within yourself. This doesn't mean they never want to go out or that they avoid all social interaction. It means they're selective about how they spend their limited energy. They don't say yes to every invitation out of obligation or fear of missing out. They consider whether an activity actually aligns with their values and interests, and they're comfortable declining when it doesn't. When they do choose to engage with the outside world, they bring full presence to it. Because they're not exhausted from constant activity, they can actually enjoy the experiences they select. They're not scrolling through their phone at dinner or thinking about the next thing. They're there, fully, because going out is meaningful rather than compulsory. For people who love staying home, their space is not just where they live. It's carefully constructed, emotional sanctuary. Every element serves a purpose. The lighting creates specific moods. The arrangement of furniture facilitates activities they value. The objects they keep tell the story of who they are and what matters to them. This isn't materialism. It's intentional environment design. They understand that physical space affects emotional state, so they create spaces that support their well-being. Home becomes the one place where they don't have to manage anyone else's emotions or meet anyone else's expectations. They can be completely themselves without performance or pretense. There's control in this too, and that control matters. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, home represents stability. They know what to expect there. They can manage the sensory input, the social demands, the emotional intensity. This predictability isn't boring. It's grounding. It's the foundation from which they can handle the unpredictability of everything else. Their homes also become spaces of productivity and creativity that external environments can't match. They can work for hours without interruption. They can lose themselves in creative projects without having to explain or justify them. They can explore interests that others might judge as weird or boring without worrying about being watched or evaluated. The rituals they develop at home become sources of meaning. The morning coffee prepared just right. The reading nook where they disappear into other worlds. The creative corner where they make things with their hands. These aren't just habits. They're practices that anchor their sense of self and provide consistent joy in ways that variable external experiences often can't. Here's where it gets interesting. People who love staying home aren't necessarily opposed to connection. In fact, they often crave it deeply, but they want authentic connection, not the performative socializing that passes for friendship in many circles. They give their hearts carefully because they feel everything intensely. When they love someone, it's with a depth and loyalty that more socially active people often can't match. They're not spreading themselves thin across dozens of surface relationships. They're investing fully in the few people who matter, who earn their trust, who can handle their depth without being overwhelmed or frightened away. This selectivity can look like coldness or disinterest to others. People extend invitations that get declined. They make overtures that seem ignored. They interpret the homebody's preference for solitude as rejection of them specifically. But it's not personal. It's about energy management and the recognition that not every potential relationship is worth the investment it requires. The paradox is that homebodies often understand relationships better than those constantly surrounded by people. They've had time to think deeply about what makes connections meaningful. They understand the difference between loneliness and solitude, between real intimacy and social performance, between people who genuinely care and people who are just passing time. They notice everything about the people they love. The sigh someone hides, the message someone doesn't send, the strength behind someone's silence. They read emotions not just through words, but through pauses, through what's unsaid through the subtle shifts in energy that others completely miss. They're the friend who remembers small details months later, who understands your feelings before you articulate them, who shows up in quiet ways that matter more than grand gestures. But staying home can also become problematic, and it's important to acknowledge this. There's a difference between choosing solitude from a place of wholeness and hiding at home. Because the world once hurt you, both can look identical from the outside, but they feel completely different from within. Some people love staying home because it genuinely nourishes them. Others stay home because somewhere along the way, they were disappointed by the world, a friendship betrayed, trust broken, a moment when their feelings were too big for others to hold. They built walls that looked like preferences, convinced themselves they chose isolation when really isolation chose them first. This is the trap. Home can become both sanctuary and prison. It offers safety, but that safety can prevent growth. It provides comfort, but that comfort can become a cage. The longer you stay in a self-constructed bubble, the more foreign the outside world becomes. The more foreign it becomes, the more anxiety you feel about engaging with it, and the more anxious you become, the more you retreat. At some point, chosen solitude can become enforced isolation. The difference isn't always clear, and many homebodies oscillate between them. Without recognizing the shift, they tell themselves they're fine alone. And maybe they are. But maybe they're also afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of disappointing others. Afraid of discovering they've forgotten how to connect even when they want to. The question they must ask themselves honestly: am I home because I'm at peace? Or am I home because I'm protecting myself from pain? Both answers are valid, but they require different responses. Peace should be honored and protected. But prolonged self-protection, while understandable, often prevents the very thing the heart craves most. Despite the potential shadows, there are genuine gifts that emerge from loving home. Gifts that constant social activity prevents from developing. The first is self-companionship. Homebodies learn to be with themselves without fear or discomfort. They don't need to fill every silence with distraction. They can sit with their own thoughts and still feel whole. This is not loneliness. This is self-connection, and it's a rare form of emotional strength. Most people run from themselves, constantly seeking external validation or distraction to avoid internal confrontation. Homebodies have done the work of making peace with who they are. They don't fear their own company because they've learned that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. They develop emotional independence too. They can regulate their own states without constant external support. When they're happy, they don't need someone else to validate that happiness. When they're sad, they can sit with sadness without someone rushing to fix it. They've become their own emotional support system out of necessity, and this makes them resilient in ways that dependence on others prevents. Their decision-making is authentically theirs. Without constant social influence, their choices reflect their actual values and interests, rather than what would impress others or fit social expectations. They pursue hobbies because they genuinely enjoy them. They make life choices based on what actually matters to them. Their lives are truly their own in a way that's increasingly rare. They also develop patience and the ability to be bored, which sounds negative, but is actually crucial for deep thought and creativity. In a world where everyone fills every empty moment with stimulation, homebodies have learned to sit with emptiness. And in that emptiness, insights emerge. Ideas come. creative solutions appear, the mind needs stillness to process, to integrate, to generate truly original thought. Society will always misunderstand people who love staying home. The questions come: don't you get bored? Aren't you lonely? Don't you want to live a little? These questions carry judgment disguised as concern, and they imply that staying home equals missing life, that your way of being needs correction. But many of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators were homebodies. They didn't always stand in crowds. They stood in their rooms, refining ideas that would change the world. Silence has its own form of communication. It teaches patience. It teaches observation. And it teaches a kind of strength that doesn't need attention to exist. The people who love staying home have learned something essential. Rest is part of growth, not its opposite. Stillness creates clarity that constant movement obscures. Silence allows understanding that noise drowns out. They're not pausing their lives by staying home. They're living them with intention, choosing meaning over movement, depth over breadth, authenticity over performance. They measure happiness differently, not in events attended or miles traveled or people impressed. They measure it in moments of genuine contentment, in the feeling of being completely themselves without apology, in the peace of a space that reflects who they actually are, in the freedom to spend time exactly as they choose without external pressure or expectation. If you're someone who loves staying home, you've probably felt the weight of being misunderstood. You've questioned whether your preference is something that needs fixing. You've wondered if something's wrong with you because you don't enjoy loud gatherings or constant plans. You've felt the subtle pressure to be more social, more adventurous, more visible. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the world simply needs more people like you? People who listen before speaking. People who think before acting. People who feel before pretending. People who choose peace over performance and authenticity over approval. Your quiet is powerful. Your preference for home isn't limitation, it's self-knowledge. You're not avoiding life. You're living it in a way that doesn't exhaust you, that honors who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. You're building a life that feels like home, and that's not something to apologize for. One day, when the time is right, when the world outside feels aligned with your heart, you might step out more. Not because you're forced to, but because you choose to. And that choice will make the outside feel even more beautiful, because you'll be bringing your whole, authentic self to it. The psychology of people who love staying home ultimately reveals something profound about human diversity. We're not all wired the same way. We don't all need the same things to feel fulfilled. Some people are meant to roam. Others are meant to root. Some need constant stimulation. Others need consistent peace. Neither is better. Neither is more evolved or more healthy or more correct. They're just different ways of being human, different strategies for finding meaning and contentment in a complex world. The tragedy is that we've created a culture that celebrates only one way, that treats movement as inherently superior to stillness, that pathologizes preference for home as something requiring intervention or correction. People who love staying home are not broken introverts who need to become more extroverted. They're not socially anxious people who need to overcome their fears, though some might be. They're not depressed individuals avoiding life, though some might struggle with that too. Many are simply people who've discovered that their richest experiences, their deepest thoughts, their most authentic selves emerge in the quiet spaces that home provides. They've learned that you don't need to travel to discover yourself. You don't need crowds to feel connected. You don't need constant novelty to find meaning. Sometimes the most profound journeys happen in the space between your front door and your favorite chair. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones you build with yourself. Sometimes the greatest adventure is learning to be at peace exactly where you are. For those who love staying home, your way of being matters. Your preference for peace over chaos, for depth over breadth, for internal richness over external validation. These aren't character flaws. They're the foundation of who you are, and they serve you even when others don't understand. You're not missing out on life. You're participating in it fully, just differently. You're not lonely in your solitude if solitude is what you chose. You're not avoiding the world if you're engaging with your internal world with full presence and intention. Keep protecting your peace. Keep honoring your need for space and silence. Keep building a life that doesn't require you to perform or pretend. Keep loving quietly but deeply. Keep discovering the universes within your own mind. Because the people who love staying home are the ones who remind the world that fulfillment doesn't require constant movement. That peace is also a way of living. That home isn't just a place. It's a state of being where you can finally, completely, unapologetically be yourself. And that, more than any adventure or achievement or external validation, is what makes a life worth living.